It's not enough just to know the articulation of speech sounds, because that doesn't capture kind of the functionally important aspects of the sounds. So we use phonological features which pull out things which are similar. Some of the terms we've already used presuppose a particular featural kind of analysis. So when I said that there were labial consonants, and there are three different kinds of labials, there are bilabials, labiodentals, and rounded segments, that presupposes that such a thing as labial exists, as opposed to having three completely different things: bilabial, labiodental, and rounded. And in fact, if you look at the history of thinking within phonetics, rounded things weren't really classed together with bilabial consonants for a very long period of time in the history of the field, until it became very clear that rounded things and bilabial things and labiodental things are treated by human beings as having shared characteristics. For example, sometimes children will have only one consonant near an oo, and that will be a b. So they'll say boo boo. And something like baby will come out as didi, because you can only have D's associated with E's. And that has to do with tongue shape and use of the lips and shared important characteristics. And you have to identify what those characteristics are. There are a number of different feature systems that are around, but the one that we use is a fairly conservative one, mostly from, say, as people we were using in the mid-1980s and since, although there are some competing theories which are around. For manner of articulation, these are three of the really important ones. A sound is plus consonantal if there's a constriction that's great enough to affect the flow of air within the oral or pharyngeal cavities. So constrictions at the larynx don't count, but above the larynx do. If something doesn't have such a constriction, it's minus consonantal. Something is continuant, plus continuant, if there's a continuous flow of air through the oral cavity. If there is not a continuous flow of air through the oral cavity, it's minus continuant, and that includes things which have a continuous flow of air through the nasal cavity. Those are still minus continuant, even though there's continuous airflow, because that's what we find captures similarities between articulations. If the pressure above the glottis is low enough to allow easy voicing, then it's a plus sonorant sound. If pressure raises, then it's minus sonorant. Putting these things together, you get these different manners of articulation. Okay, so these are the manners of articulation that are plus consonantal. These are minus consonantal. These are the ones which are minus sonorant. These are plus sonorant. These are plus continuant. And these are minus continuant, and these are plus continuant. Put them all together. A stop is plus consonantal, minus sonorant, and minus continuant. A liquid is plus consonantal. It is plus sonorant, and it is plus continuant, and so on. So as you look at this slide, you can get the major differences, pulling out the functional, what we think are the functionally important aspects of these different things. Okay, we list at the bottom something called a default. Those are the most frequent kinds of settings and often are very early learned and most frequent in most languages. And so plus consonantal, minus continuant, minus nasal, and that's also minus sonorant, would be the default, and that would be a stop. The larynx has a lot fewer major distinctions, and we basically use three features. There's voiced. Things are plus voiced if there's regular opening and closing of the vocal folds, or minus voiced otherwise. You can get the glottis spread, which is an aspiration, or voiceless fricatives, or H, and that's plus spread glottis. And in the H of the English word ahead, you have both voicing and plus spread glottis. If the glottis isn't spread, it's minus spread glottis. Typical voiced sounds are actually minus spread glottis. And the defaults are minus voiced and minus spread glottis. For some reason on this slide, we don't have constricted glottis, but I believe we have that later on. Constricted glottis, you actually constrict the glottis, mentioned it in the phonetic section, transcription section of this tutorial. A glottal stop has absolute closure. It is plus constricted glottis. And then glottalized vowels and consonants are also plus constricted glottis, as in ah. Place features correspond to the place categories that we already talked about. So you have labial with plus and minus round, also plus and minus labiodental, not on this slide. For coronal, we differentiate between anterior and plus anterior and minus anterior, and whether or not the tongue is in a grooved shape. So in s and z, there's a grooving in order to get high airflow, which leads to very loud fricative. It was mentioned in the tutorial on transcription that s and sh are very high amplitude fricatives, as opposed to something like th, which is much lower in amplitude. So s and z plus sh, zh, ch, and j are all grooved fricatives and quite loud. Most of the other coronal consonants are minus grooved, and this shows you which ones are anterior, which is made at the teeth or alveolar ridge, or minus anterior, which are behind them. The alveolo-palatal, like tie, are dental with a high tongue body. It isn't clear what to call those things. If you focus on the tip of the tongue, they're plus anterior. If you focus on the high tongue body, they're minus anterior. It's hard to know at this point, and I believe we've called them minus anterior in many cases. Dorsal consonants, we talk about them being plus high, plus low, or minus high, minus low. This shows you in this slide many of the English consonants and vowels, which would go into various things. And remember that something like a y or any palatal, including e, those are dorsal plus high. In addition to that, they are coronal minus anterior. The final couple of slides right here are just to show you the kind of reference thing that you can get. So this is for English. You can do them for any language that you want. What I've done is put up enough features to give you all of the really important distinctions that you would need for English. So both manner of articulation, which is over here on the left part of the slide, voicing, which like the IPA is sort of the lowest level, and then over here, place of articulation. I can't fit this all on one slide, so we have labials on one, coronals on another, and dorsals and placeless things on the last one. And you can see here, for example, what the labial consonants of English are. Actually, I've missed one. With W, there should be an R, which is plus round. And you can see then B is a plus voiced, labial minus round, minus continuate consonants, and so on. And just by finding the symbol, you can then get all of the important phonological features off. Here's the same kind of thing for anterior coronals. So a the, for example, is a plus anterior minus grooved coronal, which is plus voiced and plus continuant. The R is a minus anterior minus grooved coronal, which is plus voiced. It also happens to be minus nasal plus continuate plus sonorant minus consonantal, and so on. So you can get all of those features. So you can make up these things for any language. We will make them available on the website for download as well elsewhere as a useful tool for some of the languages that we've been working with. And if you're working with a language that we haven't provided these, we encourage you to make up this sort of reference sheet for your own use, for training of people who are working with you on your project, and also actually for sharing with the field more generally. Thank you.